Hello everybody, my name is Dr. Christophe Fauger. I'm a professor of economics and finance. Welcome to Mastering Money. This is session 1. What is money? Why gold? Part 1. What are the learning goals of this session? We're going to take a look at what makes gold special, when gold was used in the international monetary system, in particular the gold standard era. And then finally, we're going to examine the real bills doctrine and how it is relevant today. First, let's take a look at gold's special status. Well, really, ever since the dawn of civilization, gold has been considered to be the ultimate wealth symbol. It has been turned into jewelry and adornments for at least 7 millennia. Gold is a precious metal. It is rare. It is estimated that the above ground quantity of gold is about 1 to 2 million tons. And by comparison, in one single year, the quantity of oil extracted and consumed in 2014 was about 4,200 million tons. So about 4,200 times larger than the quantity of gold ever extracted. It is indestructible, does not rust or decay. It is very malleable, and therefore it can be easily subdivided and used as it was in antiquity as coins, typically kind of mixed with other metals to render the coin a little bit harder than gold itself. 68% of the world's gold consumption is as jewelry. Gold is also used as an industrial component. And interestingly, gold also has been used as a medical substance going back to antiquity. And nowadays, under its nanoparticle form, it's used for treatment of certain types of cancers. An interesting story. In about 600 BC, in the Babylonian kingdom, 1 ounce of gold used to buy 350 loaves of bread. And if we do a kind of a rough calculation nowadays using the price of a French bread, it turns out that this calculation shows that 1 ounce of gold buys about 322 loaves of bread, so very close to the 350 of 600 BC. Overall, it's been documented that gold preserves its value when compared to a basket of staple goods, and so therefore gold is an excellent store of value. Let's now talk about the gold standard. The gold standard is a monetary system in which currencies values are backed by gold, and the system is managed to achieve economic stability. What's the mechanism? Each participating nation can issue money, M1, only in a fixed proportion to its gold reserves. For example, the ratio of M1 to gold was 8.5 in the US over the period 1880 to 1913. Each currency can thus be converted against a fixed amount of gold, and the exchange rates of one currency to another are depending a lot on the balance of trades and the reserves of gold. But otherwise, they are pretty stable. The classic gold standard period took place between 1821 and 1914. During that time, gold was the only precious metal that was backing the national currencies. If we look at some important dates, 1717, gold becomes the de facto currency of England because Sir Isaac Newton, who is the director, the head of the mint for England, issues a new coin, gold coin, which makes the holding of silver coins much less attractive, and therefore silver coins are no longer much in circulation. People prefer to hold gold coins. In 1792, this is the birth of the US dollar, which is based on the bimetallic system. So both gold and silver are backing the US dollar. 1821, this is the creation of the pure or classic gold standard, with England being the first to adopt the gold standard. Other European and Western countries joined the standard in the 1870s. 1934, a little bit of trouble for the gold standard when the US suspends a conversion, the dollar conversion into gold. 1944-45, you have the Bretton Woods Agreement that now change the pure gold standard into a gold exchange standard where the dollar becomes the dominant currency. We're going to take a look at this a little bit later. And then at the end of Bretton Woods in 1971, you have the birth of the current monetary system where national currencies are fiat currencies, which means that the value of the national currency is based mostly on the faith that the citizens have in their governments. Let's look at the gold price during the gold dominance era up until the end of Bretton Woods. So now you see that over large periods of time, up until the mid-1830s, you have gold that's stable in value about a little bit less than 20 US dollars. Then its value, the dollar has been reevaluated at above, gold is being reevaluated to be worth about above $20. And then because people are fleeing in 1934 and they're fleeing the dollars and trying to convert in gold, the value of gold in US dollars has been reevaluated to be worth $35. After 1971, the price of gold becomes flexible as gold is being traded on the markets as a commodity. And you can see the large fluctuations. And the highest price is reached in the midst of the financial crisis, European sovereign debt crisis in 2011, and reaches almost $1,890. Now let's take a look at the real bills doctrine, which was a way of managing the money supply during the gold standard era. And the real bill doctrine states that the quantity of money to be issued should be so in direct proportion of the economy's real output, not necessarily as a fixed proportion of gold reserves. So it's an alternate view of the way to run monetary policy during that era. The confidence or the trust that people have in the value of money will be preserved according to that view as long as the banks can extend loans that are backed by real assets. For instance, if a bank opens a line of credit to a customer and this credit is backed by inventory or receivables. Under these conditions, the stock of money will vary directly with real GDP, and money will fulfill its function of buying real goods while keeping prices stable. That's, in theory, what's expected. Early on in the 19th century, people have come up with some criticism of the real bill doctrine, and they found some logical errors. One being that, well, if a businessman comes and asks for a loan, the value of the loan is expressed in nominal terms, which reflects what? The value and the price of the items that this businessman is trying to purchase. So therefore, it is not independent of inflation. And if inflation is high, then the value of the loan also that is being asked by the businessman will be high, and therefore can fuel further inflation in the economy. Second, the analysis ignores the role of consumer credit. So this is not necessarily examined in that theory. And the third criticism is that when banks have a large profit margin, which are expressed by their what we call interest margins, that is the gap between the interest that they can borrow at and the interest that they can lend at, they will have an incentive to extend more credit independently of real GDP and of the type of loans, especially if the type of loan has a weak collateral. Case in point, this is what happened during the subprime crisis. However, this theory, this doctrine, still has some relevance, and it looks like it may be applicable to our contemporaneous economies at the macro level and in the long run. Let's show how. So we're going to go back to the basics of monetary theory, and we're going to take a look at what's called the quantity theory of money. And this is the quantity theory of money as it was expressed by Irving Fisher in the early 20th century, and then later by Milton Friedman in the 1940s. And it states, this is the main equation of the quantity theory of money. It says MV equals PY, where M is the money, the quantity of money in circulation. V is called the velocity of money, which is the number of times that money circulates or changes hands in the economy. P is the general level of price or price index, and Y is real GDP. So we're going to see how this quantity theory of money equation relates to the real bills doctrine. Just a little piece of clarification here, just in case, just to express and to clarify what the velocity of money. I have this little example. Imagine that you have €1 in your pocket, and today you spend this euro to buy bread. Then tomorrow the bread maker goes to the shop and buys a hammer. The tool shop owner then in turns use that same euro to buy a newspaper, and so on and so forth. And if the number of times that that single euro changes hands is 400 times during the year, then the velocity would be equal to 400. So that's an explanation, an intuitive explanation of what velocity means. So let's now bring together the quantity theory of money and the real bills doctrine. So the real bills doctrine can be reinterpreted to say the following. It says that the monetary mass should be in a total adequation with real output. So money in circulation should vary directly with real GDP. Well, what does it imply, or what does the quantity theory of money imply when you have this equality? Well, if you look at the previous equation, then it means that this can only hold if the general price index varies directly with the velocity of money, which is kind of a bizarre connection, but we're going to see that this is actually not far from what is actually happening. Empirically, the rate of variation of velocity of money has been about 2% a year in the long run in the US. This is a research paper that I did in 2016. And if we look at what's happening on the side of general level of prices or inflation, we know that since the 1980s, most of the Western central banks are targeting a long-term rate of inflation that's about 2%. So you have this table here, and you have the different types of the different central banks and what their targeting of inflation is in the long run. So this value of 2% inflation shows up for the inflation targeting, meaning that the general level of prices should grow in the long run at about 2%, which is still true today. in most central banks' targets. And we have, on the other hand, the velocity of money that grows at about 2% a year. These two values are identical. And that means if we follow the logic of the QTM, that means if we go back the step prior, that essentially the money should grow at the same rate as real GDP, which then tends to confirm the real bills doctrine. So the real bills doctrine seems to be implicitly something that is going on in our modern economies. So thank you very much for your attention.